Good evening, welcome to This Week in Turkey. Tonight we will focus on the recent tensions between Turkey and Germany, and joining us from Stockholm, Sweden is Suat Kınıklıoğlu, who is a former member of the Turkish Parliament and also a senior fellow at the Institute for Security and Development Policy in Stockholm. Good evening, Mr. Kınıklıoğlu.
Good evening.
Hello, welcome to This Week in Turkey. So the German media reported recently that hundreds of German companies were being investigated by Turkish authorities on suspicion of their involvement in terrorist activities. But this obviously sparked new tensions between the two countries. But this dispute seems to be a part of an ongoing series of disputes between these two countries. Previously, we've seen crises happen over the arrests of German citizens, journalists, activists, and also barred rallies of Turkish ministers in Germany. So, for starters, can you explain for our viewers how this current dispute is different from the other ones?
Well, as you said, this recent incident is coming on top of a number of other issues, including the barring of German lawmakers having access to İncirlik Air Base, the detention of German journalists, and of course recently one human rights activist who was a German citizen who was part of the group that was detained in Büyükada. So this list that has been forwarded by the Turkish Ministry of Economy has now obviously been withdrawn, but it has already created quite a bit of uproar in Germany, given the extent of the list and also the inclusion of a number of companies, very well-known companies such as Daimler-Benz and BASF, etc., which sparked an uproar in Germany. The German foreign minister cut off his vacation and returned to Berlin, and a harsh statement has been issued by the German Foreign Ministry condemning this list. And as a consequence, as you know, Turkey has quickly withdrawn the list with the explanation that there has been a communication mistake made by the Turkish side. But overall, the relationship is rather tense. Despite being in the middle of the summer and many people being on vacation on both sides, still there is almost a daily development on either side, which also is of course conditioned by the fact that Germany is approaching a general election in September.
Mm-hmm. And as you know, this crisis has an economic aspect, and Germany is a very important trading partner for Turkey. So how severe of a damage do you think that this crisis can have for the future of the economic relations between the two countries?
Well, the travel ban that's been issued by Germany has already had an impact. We see a sharp drop in German tourists coming to Turkey, which comes on top of an overall malaise in Turkey's tourism sector. Second, the withdrawing of credit guarantees by the German government to companies who choose to invest in Turkey is an important step. We may not see the short-term impact immediately, but in the medium to long run, you will see that more German companies will be hesitant to invest in Turkey. And thirdly, overall, the image of the country of constantly detaining journalists, rough statements on both sides, is making many German investors wary in coming up with new investment. That doesn't mean that the investment that's already in Turkey is leaving. I think the investment in Turkey mostly still feels that Turkey is a large and important market for its products, and may not be expanding their operations, but they're also not leaving.
Mm-hmm. And as you know, Germany, as well as other European and Western governments, have been hesitant to acknowledge the role of Fethullah Gülen and his movement in last year's failed coup attempt. Do you think that this ongoing crisis may have a definitive impact on this hesitation?
Well, the one problem with, of course, this hesitation on the European/Western side has been the absence of a credible narrative from the government side. I mean, it's been now a year, more than a year, since the coup attempt, and there's still many aspects of the events happening not being made clear. The government obviously has had a disastrous communication strategy. It was not able to convince European governments about the extent of Gülen's involvement in the coup. So I think, although many Western governments and European circles are beginning to appreciate better the role of Gülen in the July 15th coup attempt, it's still the overall image of the government, the harsh statements, the short-term politicization of confrontation with Europe for electoral gains that really upsets people back in Europe. We also cannot overlook the fact of restrictions on human rights, minority rights, freedom of expression, freedom of assembly, and many other fundamental values that are critical for normal democracies.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Kınıklıoğlu, thank you very much for your comments and for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me. Bye-bye.
We'll continue with our next news video on the recent tensions between Turkey and Germany.
After the German media reported 2 weeks ago that hundreds of German companies were being investigated by Turkish authorities on suspicion of supporting a terror organization, German-Turkish ties have become tensed once again. Although Turkey withdrew its request at the Interpol and said it was all due to a miscommunication and misunderstanding, providing assurance that there was no probe against any German firms operating in Turkey, German government decided to take a number of economic measures against Turkey through the European Union, calling the EU Commission to suspend a process to upgrade the customs union with Turkey as well as pre-accession financial assistance. On Monday, presidential spokesperson Ibrahim Kalın accused German officials of depicting Turkey as an unsafe country for its investors and said in a TV interview, "There is no risk or threat. Although we underline this in the strongest way possible, the German government is in a force to turn this into a crisis because of the approaching elections in September and other reasons." Economy Minister Nihat Zeybekçi said the reports were the result of an obvious misunderstanding and a communication mistake. 1 week ago, Prime Minister Binali Yıldırım said at a meeting with senior representatives of leading German companies in Turkey, "It's very important to us that you are not a part of this tension and don't suffer any damage from the events," adding that the tension between Germany and Turkey was temporary. Furthermore, amid these disputes, a consortium, which is led by the German giant Siemens, won a $1 billion wind energy tender, offering the lowest price to the Turkish state on August 3rd. The tender ended with a win by German company Siemens. We can say that this picture sends an important message to the region and the world, Energy Minister Berat Albayrak told the media after the auction. On the other hand, European Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker said in an interview on August 3rd that enlargement talks with Turkey should not be halted. "Turkey is our neighbor. We can't simply let it slip into oblivion. I am not in favor of ending the accession talks with Turkey, which is a demand from the European Parliament," he added. Relations between Turkey and Germany have been passing through one of its most difficult phases since earlier this year, when the latter banned Turkish ministers campaigning in its territories before the April 16th constitutional referendum. The arrest of a Turkish-German journalist Deniz Yücel in February and a human rights activist Petar Steutner, as well as Turkey's rejection of a group of German lawmakers to visit their troops in the Incirlik base in southern Turkey, have further fueled the dispute.
US Special Presidential Envoy Brett McGurk's remarks on Turkey's involvement in the Idlib province of Syria were received as provocative by Ankara.
Speaking at a panel at the Middle East Institute in Washington on July 27th, U.S. Special Presidential Envoy for the Global Coalition to Counter ISIS, Brett McGurk, made striking remarks on Syria, especially on its Idlib province. McGurk said, "Idlib now is a huge problem. It's an Al-Qaeda safe haven right on the border of Turkey. This is obviously something that we will be in very close discussion with the Turks on," he said.
But we have to ask a question: why and how is Ayman al-Zawahiri's deputy finding his way to Idlib province? Why is this happening? How are they getting there? They're not paratroopers. So, and the approach, I obviously will not talk about anything the US government has done in certain parts of Syria on this problem, but the approach by some of our partners to send in tens of thousands of tons of weapons and looking the other way as these foreign fighters come into Syria may not have been the best approach. And Al-Qaeda has taken full advantage of it. And Idlib now is a huge problem. It is an Al-Qaeda safe haven right on the border of Turkey. So that's something obviously we will be in very close discussions with the Turks on.
Ankara's reaction to the remarks of McGurk was bold. Turkish Foreign Ministry announced that it had protested remarks by Brett McGurk, calling them provocative. Our reaction to the statements of Brett McGurk, in which he associated Turkey with the presence of terrorist organizations in Idlib, was brought to Mr. McGurk's attention at a high-level démarche, and his statements, which could be characterized as provocative, were protested, Foreign Minister spokesperson Hüseyin Müftüoğlu said in a written statement on July 30th. In addition, Mr. McGurk was reminded of both the fact that the root causes enabling terrorist organizations to find foothold in Syria and Iraq could only be eradicated only if the deeds and actions of all relevant actors do not contradict one another, and our expectations that the Syria-based terrorist organization PYD-YPG is not supported for whatever the reason may be, Müftüoğlu also said.
The July 15th coup attempt trials continue.
Turkey started its largest trial ever over the July 15 failed coup attempt, resulting with 249 deaths. The Ankara 4th Criminal Court began on August 1st the trial on events at the Akıncı Air Base. Prosecutors are demanding 330 life sentences for 45 suspects accused of being leaders of the coup attempt. A total of 461 defendants are behind bars, while 18 were freed after the outcome of the trial. 7 others, including Fethullah Gülen himself, are still wanted by the Turkish authorities. The trial, which is expected to last at least a month, is one of the dozens underway in Turkey in relation to the coup attempt. According to the state news agency, there are 650 ongoing cases against the FETÖ organization. 25 of these are directly related with the failed coup attempt. Today, approximately 160,000 people are part of these trials. Furthermore, during the aftermath of the coup attempt, over 40,000 people were arrested and nearly 140,000 were sacked or suspended, including soldiers, police, teachers, and other public servants.
Turkey's top religious official Mehmet Görmez retired from his post on Monday, shortly after a smear campaign alleged ties between him and the Gülenist network.
Turkey's top religious official, the head of the Directorate of Religious Affairs, retired from his post on Monday. His retirement request was accepted by the Turkish Prime Ministry. The meeting Görmez held with President Erdogan last week was widely interpreted as a signal of his resignation. 2 days after the meeting, Görmez presented a report prepared by the Directorate titled FETÖ in its own language, an organized exploitation of religion. During the launching of the report, Görmez said, "All posts are liability that needs to be returned when the time arrives." Görmez's leaving of his post came after a smear campaign alleging ties between him and the FETÖ organization. In April, it was rumored that the Directorate intentionally set the date for the celebrations for the birth of Prophet Muhammad on the same week with Fethullah Gülen's birthday. The Directorate and Görmez denied the accusations. In May, during a morning show on the pro-government TV channel TGRT, it was claimed that Görmez wrote a letter to Fethullah Gülen and dedicated one of his books to him. Later on, a columnist falsified these accusations, claiming that a book signed by Görmez for another person ended up in the hands of Fethullah Gülen. In his farewell speech, Görmez said that the Directorate of Religious Affairs should not experience the embarrassment of being 40 years late in the struggle against any perverted religious structure once more, referring to the Gülen network. Later this week, it was announced that Görmez will be founding president of the International Islamic University to be founded in Istanbul.
CHP has announced that it would hold a 4-day Justice Congress to draw attention to the judicial deficiencies in Turkey following their 450-kilometer justice march from Ankara to Istanbul last month.
The main opposition Republican People's Party, CHP, is set to hold a 4-day Justice Congress with the aim of underlining judicial deficiencies in Turkey. The Congress comes after CHP leader Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu conducted a justice march from Ankara to Istanbul to voice concerns over justice in Turkey. In the Congress, all segments of the society in Turkey will discuss injustices, the current issues and seek solutions, CHP Deputy Leader Bülent Tezcan announced at a press conference on Monday. Similar to the Justice March, the main opposition is planning to hold the Congress at a supra-party level after it was approved by the party's Central Executive Board. It should be above and beyond parties, just like the Justice March. We will bring those subjected to injustices to the front, Kılıçdaroğlu told CHP members, adding that the only aim of the party should be to host victims. It shouldn't be our Congress, but should be the Congress of everyone subjected to injustices. We should only be hosting victims, he added. Those going to be invited will include Raquel Dink, the wife of the murdered Turkish-Armenian journalist Hrant Dink, the family of Berkin Elvan, a 15-year-old boy who was killed during the 2013 Gezi protests, the family of the teacher Necmettin Yılmaz, who was killed by the PKK in the eastern province of Tunceli, relatives of intellectuals who were killed by an arson attack in the central Anatolian province of Sivas in 1993, and women whose rights to education were taken away in the past due to their headscarves. CHP Deputy Leader Bülent Tezcan explained the aim of the Congress for Medyascope TV.
Between August 26th and 30th, in other words, between the anniversary of the Great Offensive of the Turkish War of Independence and that of the Victory Day, we will hold the Justice Congress in Çanakkale. First of all, we have to underline that this is a supra-party Congress, just as it was during the No campaign for the constitutional referendum. In the No campaign, we were able to bring together all democratic forces against the one-man rule. It was not under the hegemony of a political party, and it was effective. Then Justice March created a larger ground. We saw that the Justice March was also supported by an important part of the society who voted yes in the referendum. Therefore, on this wider ground, we will come together and discuss all the problems in Turkey. We will discuss at length about social inequality, justice at court, justice in the state, justice at elections, justice in education, and justice in the media. And we invite everybody to this Congress.
HDP's Conscience and Justice Watch continues in Yoğurtçu Park in Istanbul.
People's Democratic Party's Conscience and Justice Watch continues in Yoğurtçu Park in Istanbul. The opposition party has launched a watch in Diyarbakır on July 25th to demand the release of jailed HDP deputies. After completing a week in Diyarbakır, a Kurdish majority city in southeast Turkey, the watch arrived to Istanbul on Tuesday. Upon the arrival of HDP deputies who continue the watch, the police closed down the Yoğurtçu Park and surrounded it with anti-riot water cannon vehicles. Only deputies, HDP administrators, local representatives and the press have been allowed to enter the park. Party supporters were denied entrance to show support. The main opposition party, a delegation from the Republican People's Party (CHP), came to Yoğurtçu Park to show solidarity with the HDP. Last month, the leader of the CHP, Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu, had started a justice march from Ankara to Istanbul to protest the jailing of a CHP deputy, which was followed by a mass justice rally in Istanbul. HDP participated in the Justice March and rally, which were considered as an attempt to bring the opposition together under demands related to justice. The Istanbul leg of Conscience and Justice Watch will last for a week. Currently, there are 10 HDP deputies in prison, including the co-chair of the party, Selahattin Demirtas. The former co-chair of the HDP, Figen Yüksekdağ, was stripped of her status as an MP with a parliamentary decision in February 2017. Recently, the Turkish parliament stripped off the status of 2 more HDP lawmakers.
Turkish national football team's top coach Fatih Terim was dismissed from his post last week.
Fatih Terim's 3-year tenure as the Turkish football's top coach ended last week when the Turkish Football Federation announced that the two sides parted ways. Terim was recently involved in a brawl in the holiday resort of Alaçatı, Izmir, amid tensions between his son-in-law, who runs a restaurant in the resort, and the owner of a neighboring kebab house. The owner of the kebab house, a former friend of Terim, filed criminal charges against the veteran coach on accusations of assault. The amount of compensation that the federation is obliged to pay Terim was also a matter of dispute. Terim said he had not stepped down but was actually fired by the federation, which means the federation has to pay him 3.5 million euros, what he would have received if his 4-year contract had been fully completed. The public opinion is harsh on Terim since he was one of the highest earning coaches amongst national team coaches, despite lack of success of the national football team during his last tenure. After Fatih Terim's departure, the federation offered the position to Şenol Güneş first, who is the coach of Beşiktaş Football Club. The proposal was rejected by the club. After this rejection, Romanian coach Mircea Lucescu took over as the Turkish national team head coach on Wednesday.
That's all from This Week in Turkey. Thanks for tuning in and hope to see you again next Friday at 9 p.m. Goodbye.